Okay, hey everybody, how you doing? Tekking and Barry back again. Hey, do you remember in the last video when I said I was going on vacation today? Yeah, well, slight change to those plans. I'm still going, but the departure time has changed. So basically, I have more time to make a video before I go, so I decided to do that, because why not, right? Alright, so today, and why not talk about my favorite Straw Hat, and honestly, the best character in all of One Piece. I mean, look. You can go on and on about your Monkey D. Luffy's and your Kaidos, and we could talk about how Buggy is actually the strongest being in the entire universe, rivaled only by Usopp. We could go on and on for days about that, but let's just all stop kidding ourselves for a second here and just admit, uniformly, as an entire species, that Franky is the best One Piece character. I mean, come on. He's a robot. He runs on Coca-Cola, maybe Pepsi. I wonder what would happen if you gave Franky different kinds of soda from our universe. You know, it's like, here's some Coca-Cola. Here's Diet Coca-Cola. Here's Diet Coca-Cola caffeine-free. Here's some Sprite. Here's some 7-Up. What's your favorite soda? Actually, legitimate question, because I've only lived in the U.S. my entire life. What kinds of soda or pop exists where you live that maybe I've never heard of before? You know, like a really good soda that's in, I don't know, freaking Bangladesh. I always come back to Bangladesh for some reason, but whatever. But yeah, you know what, enough about that. I'm already getting off on a tangent here. Okay, so today's video is going to be about something that's actually been brought up a few times. I've even discussed this before, involving Franky. And this was something that actually kind of blew my mind the first time I read the chapter. And it's, once again, in volume 96. I actually went back and I reread the Odin flashback, just all of it, plus I watched the episodes in the anime. It's a very emotional scene, just because, like, we're seeing Roger sailing around and doing pirate things. Now, granted, this was at the very end of Roger's adventure, so I think we're gonna get another flashback later, or who knows, maybe even after One Piece ends, we'll get, like, a prequel to, like, how Roger began his journey, and maybe how it was a little bit different from Luffy's. Like, there were comparisons, definitely, like, they both went to Sky Island and stuff, but the implication was that Roger did not go to Sky Island until, like, the very, very end of his journey. He'd been traveling around the seas for well over, like, 2 decades at that point before he arrived at Skypiea, and Skypiea was one of the first places Luffy went, you know, comparable on his journey, right? So it'd be cool to see, like, some kind of prequel with that. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent again. There's a chapter where Roger and Odin and the whole pirate crew go to Water 7, and they arrive there, and they see Tom and everybody, and Tom's there, and you see Iceberg there as a kid, and then Franky is also there, because this was 26 years ago, so Franky would have been 10 years old at this point, and Odin is the only one that really notices him, because Franky is kind of off to the side on Scrap Island, and he's just, you know, apparently building, like, maybe the first Battle Franky, like, ever, and so all the Roger pirates are kind of talking to Tom. Odin just kind of sees Franky and goes over, and he's just like, hey, are you an orphan? Do you want to travel with the Roger pirates? And Franky just kind of looks at him and just like, no, just, no, I don't want to travel with pirates. Like, who does that? Who just walks up to a random kid in a junkyard and is like, hey, you an orphan? You look like an orphan. Let's go and travel. Let's go, let's find the One Piece. Why not, right? And just like, Franky's like, no, I was just abandoned by pirates. I hate pirates. No, I'm staying here and I'm building my giant weapons to destroy Sea Kings. That's what my story's gonna be about, right? And so it's cool because, like, every character in One Piece kind of has their own thing going on, their own the main characters of their own stories, right? So that's all we get in the manga. There's really only, like, one panel where, like, maybe two. There's 2 panels where Odin is, like, sitting down and, like, talking to Franky, and then it immediately cuts to the next scene. But regardless, I was like, holy crap, Franky met Odin? Now Franky did not meet Roger or anybody like that, because he was off to the side, not even paying attention to them. I'm sure Tom mentioned Roger visited to Franky later that night when they were, like, all having dinner together or whatever, but Franky didn't really care, because he was all focused on building his Battle Frankies, and he was, like, 10 years old at that point, so who's gonna remember some random person. Yeah, I was just hanging out one day and some random samurai walked over. Okay, granted, if that happened to me, I'd probably remember if a random samurai that was like 10 feet tall, just, came to my island and, asked me to join a pirate crew. I guess that is kind of a unique encounter. But, Franky was very dedicated to his craft. Okay, so he just completely forgot about it, right? Maybe if, I don't know, maybe if somebody jogs his memory at some point, maybe if, the Straw Hats meet another member of the Roger Pirates, like they run into Scopper Gabon or somebody, maybe it'd be like, yeah, we went to Water 7, remember? Odin was there when you were probably there. And maybe Franky would be like, oh, yeah, that guy, that was Odin, maybe, who knows? But that got me thinking, and that got a lot of people thinking about what would have happened if Franky would have actually accepted Odin's offer there and joined the Roger Pirates. It's this weird thing where, Odin is not the captain of the ship, okay? So I don't know if he can just, invite people on. But Roger's a pretty cool guy, right? So if Odin asked Franky to join the Roger Pirates, and if Franky was like, yeah, sure, that sounds super, let's do that. And then Odin went over to, like, ask Roger, like, hey, this kid wants to join. And I guess if Tom was okay with it, it was like, sure, Franky. Well, he wasn't Franky yet, he was Cutty Flam. He's like, sure, Cutty Flam, you could go out to sea and see the sea. Just do it with a dawn. And just like, okay. And just like, holy crap, Franky could have been a member of the Roger Pirates. He would have been so ridiculously powerful if that was the case. And so you gotta understand, like, I love Franky as a character. I mean, he's a weird guy and he owns it. So you gotta think about all the cool stuff, like if he joined the Roger crew and he traveled around with them for years and he trained and he was like super powerful by the time the present storyline rolled around. He'd know hockey and he'd be like Battle Franky 58 or whatever, and he'd have like all these really advanced cannons on him. Like he would have found Pluton on Laughtail and like incorporated it into himself. Like it'd be insanity, right? It'd be crazy. That would be really cool. But the thing is, honestly, I don't think that even if Franky joined the Roger Pirates, things would really be all that different in terms of him getting stronger. And in fact, might actually be a situation where Franky might be weaker than he is right now. Kind of. Okay, so allow me to explain this. This was Roger's swan song. You have to understand, this was his last journey, and he knew he was about to die. So this was 26 years ago when Odin met Franky at Water 7, and Roger was executed 24 years ago, okay? And so he disbanded the crew right after they found Laughtail. So there was like a year or a year and a half of like a buffer zone before Roger was actually executed and then officially kicked off the Great Age of Piracy and all that stuff, right? So like I said, Franky is not interested in that kind of stuff. He's not interested in being a pirate until the Straw Hats rolled around. Like, at this point in his life, he was just abandoned by his parents. And by the way, that's something else I wanted to bring up is the phrase Franky does say in the flashback is, a pirate? No way. I just got abandoned by pirates, okay? So Franky was 10 there, and I always assumed that Franky was, like, abandoned by his parents when he was, like, a baby on Water 7, okay? So he didn't even really remember his parents. But with that line, the way he says it, like, I was just abandoned, might have only happened when he was 10 or maybe, like, 9, you know? Like, it wasn't long, you know, before Odin and Roger Pirates arrived that Franky, like, was abandoned there by his parents. So that actually means that Franky probably does have at least some memory of his parents and what they were like, and the fact that he hates pirates, he has that hatred of them early on until he met the Straw Hats, because of his parents abandoning him, right? So, I don't know, we might have a moment in the story where we actually do get to find out a little bit about Franky's parents, or maybe the story involved there, maybe they were killed by the Rock's crew or something back in the day. Well, I guess not, because Rox's crew would have been wiped out 38 years ago. That would have been 12 years before Odin met Franky, so that couldn't have happened. But they still could have, like, pissed off Big Mom or somebody, and they could have gotten killed that way. There wasn't very much time left in the journey, so let's just assume Franky did join, okay? So Franky joined the Roger Pirates, and, you know, there's, like, you know, Shanks and Buggy are also on the crew as well. Franky would have been a little bit younger than them, yeah, because Shanks is 39 right now, Franky is 36, so so Shanks was, and Buggy as well, were 3 years older than Franky. They would have been 13 at this point, near the end of the journey. So, though, he probably would have, like, palled around with them, and so you could see some cool dynamics there. Franky hanging out with, like, Shanks and Buggy on the ship as they're traveling. Would Franky have learned about Laughtail? I mean, maybe. It's possible, right? Like, Shanks and Buggy had to stay behind, so it's possible Franky might have stayed behind as well with them, because those were the members of the crew he would probably have, like, the most in common with. So he traveled around with Roger's crew for, like, maybe not even a year, honestly, a couple of months, and yeah, he might have learned some stuff along the way on how to fight and everything like a pirate, and he could incorporate his engineering expertise on the crew, and whoever the shipwright was on the Oro Jackson, maybe he could have learned some stuff from them as well, although that's a little weird thing in itself, okay, because this was only in the anime, this wasn't in the manga, thank God, because it honestly kind of creates a little bit of a problem. So in the anime, when the Roger pirates go into the sky and they find the poneglyph, and, Odin etches the message into the side of it, right? They're heading back down to the Blue Sea. And just like with the Straw Hats, they had the octopus balloon, and then the octopus balloon deflates before they hit the water, and then it crashes down. Like, the Oro Jackson hits the water, and it's like, we're back on the Blue Sea, right? And in the anime, Scopper Gabon comes out, and he's like, hey, everybody, there's something wrong with the ship. It's like apparently being dropped from a great height, several thousand meters, kind of knocks something out. I'm not really sure what's wrong with it, though. I don't have a skilled enough eye for this. And the Roger pirates are like, oh, okay, well, I guess we gotta go to Water 7 and see Tom so he can fix our ship. And then they go, and I'm just sitting there like, wait, did the Roger pirates not have a skilled shipwright on their crew? Like, what? Now, like, I can understand in the manga, because it doesn't, like, go into detail. It's just the Roger pirates, land after Skypiea, and then the next island they go to is Water 7. And I just assumed that was, like, because they were already so close to Water 7, like, when the Straw Hats were close to it, like, when they landed there. So they just decided, hey, we're pretty close to where Water 7 is. Let's stop in and say hi to Tom. And, I'm sure maybe Tom looked at the Oro Jackson and is just like, oh, make sure everything's, like, ship shape and everything. But, like, the idea that, like, Scopper Gabon was just like, I don't know what's wrong with the ship, guys. It's like, you're pirates and you don't have a shipwright that can look at the ship and find out, like, yeah, you fell from, like, 3,000 meters up from an octopus balloon. Yeah, this is broken. I need to fix this or whatever. I can understand going to Water 7 for supplies, but I don't understand, like, they wouldn't be able to do that. But whatever. It's a shipwright on the Roger Pirates. Okay, I'm going to assume that. And, Franky could have learned some stuff from them and, like, along the way. And just like, oh, this is how you do this. This is how you build a giant death cannon. All right, thank you. I didn't know that, right? So he wouldn't have traveled with them for very long. They might have gotten into some fights along the way. Franky might have learned how to fight at a younger age, whatever, but it's like not going to be anything substantial. It's not like he would have been traveling with the Roger Pirates for decades and decades, in his formative years and really learning how to fight and learn hockey and everything like that, right? And so after like only a couple of months, maybe half a year at most, let's just give him a year, traveling with Roger for a year. I don't think it was that long, but let's just assume that, okay? They find the One Piece, they go to Laughtail, Franky could be there, Franky might not be there, who knows, but they find Laughtail, and immediately after that, they disband the crew. Like, Roger disbands the crew pretty much right after they find Laughtail, and they all go their separate ways. And at that point, they were pretty much just sailing around, kind of dropping off the members wherever they wanted to go. So the Oro Jackson goes back to Wano and drops Odin off, so they would probably do the same thing for Franky. And just like, all right, we'll drop you back off at Water 7. And so Franky would be back, and it's like, nothing would really be different. He might learn a little bit more about the world, and he might have learned... The most substantial thing was he might have learned what the One Piece was. That's pretty much it, okay? Which I know that's a big deal. I'm just saying, like, don't think that, like, Franky's gonna come back and he's gonna be like, I'm super powerful now. I'm, like, one of the strongest characters in the story. Just, like, he's still a kid, and he'd only travel with the Roger Pirates for only a few months, a year at most. So, whatever. But then he would get back to Water 7, and it would pretty much probably just be, like, the regular regular story of events, right? At best, he would just continue to build the Battle Frankies. Eventually, he would get hit by the train. Wouldn't it be weird? Because oddly enough, it was that train accident that actually made Franky get stronger, because it was the accident that allowed him to, like, turn himself into a cyborg, and that's where all of his, like, power comes from, right? So it would have been really funny if, like, it's like a butterfly effect where, like, traveling with the Roger Pirates for just that a brief amount of time changed history enough so that Franky did not end up getting hit by the sea train. He did not turn himself into a cyborg, and he's actually substantially weaker. So I doubt that would be the case. You know, I think Franky would have still, like, you know, cared about Tom, and Tom would have gotten taken away regardless. You know, and maybe it might have been a different story where, like, Tom would have ended up having to protect Franky because Franky did travel with the Roger Pirates briefly, and so the government would want to come after him, and so then Tom had to protect him, and that's another thing on how Tom might have ended up getting arrested and thrown on the sea train or whatever, and Franky would have tried to stop it, and he still would have gotten hurt. He still would have had to turn himself into a cyborg either way, right? So there's that. But yeah, then nothing really major is probably going to happen, because it's not like Franky's going to go around and blab about what he saw at Laughtail, like if he did see it. You know, he's going to stay underground. He's going to have the Franky family. I think all that stuff is still going to pretty much happen. Although learning about the true history, learning about the Void Century and stuff like that might make Franky a little bit more invested in, like, studying history himself. You know, maybe he might not seek to build weapons like the Battle Frankies, because maybe he learns about Pluton at Laughtail, and it's like, oh, this was a giant battleship, and at the time, it's like, that's awesome, but it's like, oh, look what happened with what the government used it for, right? So it's like, oh, that's not awesome, right? And, well, later, actually, with the blueprints, wow, this is actually fascinating. If we're gonna go along with the logic that you find out about all of the ancient weapons when you're on Laughtail. Like, you know, you find out about Pluton, Poseidon, Uranus. You find out about all of them and what they do and where they're hidden and what they're all about. By the time Franky returns and talks to Tom, he would probably be like, hey, I went to this place and I learned about this ancient weapon, Pluton. And Tom has the blueprints to Pluton. And he probably would not have told Iceberg and Franky about it because they were still kids. It wouldn't be probably until a little bit later that, you know, he gave the blueprints to Iceberg, and then Iceberg eventually gave them to Franky to keep them safe, right? But if Franky already learned about the ancient weapons and he told Tom about it, then Tom would have been like, shh, you gotta keep that a secret, Cuddy Flam. You can't be going around talking about ancient weapons, right? And so maybe Tom would have sat him down at a younger age and just told him, like, about what the ancient weapons are and about Pluton and how it was built in Water 7 and here are the blueprints and all that kind of crap. Franky would have just found out about this a lot earlier, and he would have greater context into what it means, right? That's probably all that would really happen. Maybe or maybe not, Franky would have built more Battle Frankies along the way because, you know, the idea is like, oh, this ancient weapon caused so much damage, I'm not going to do the same thing. And if Franky did not build his Battle Frankies, then he would not have, well, number one, he wouldn't have as much skill as, you know, like with technology, as like engineering to make himself into a cyborg. He would still know a little bit, but if he didn't build all the Battle Frankies, those were kind of like the prototypes for his own cyborg body. So if he didn't build any of those, then, you know, he wouldn't have as much know-how with it when he finally wanted to reconstruct himself. And also, though, that would also set off a chain of events where Spondum would not be able to use the Battle Frankies to attack the island, and so that was the whole reason, like one of the reasons why, you know, Tom was, had to use his pardon to get off the hook for that. So then he ended up being punished for the Oro Jackson for building that for Roger's crew. So if that never happened, then Tom would have been left off the hook completely. Franky as well. Tom would have still been alive. Franky would not have been a cyborg, and they would have just stayed on Water 7 just building new sea trains by the time the Straw Hats finally arrived. Weird. Weird. It's like, you know, who would have thought that? Like, the angle of, like, Franky joining the Roger Pirates in a weird way would have made Franky less strong by the time the Straw Hats finally met him, right? And Franky still might not have been interested in joining the crew. He might have been like, I'm happy here. I'm working with Tom. Kokoro, iceberg, everybody's happy. No tragedies have befallen this island. We're just building more sea trains. That's all. And just like, and also, I guess CP9 would have still went to the island to try to find the blueprints, though. It's just that Tom would have still been alive, and Iceberg and Franky would have been still working together. Maybe Iceberg might have still been the mayor. It's possible, but he probably would still be just working with Tom, I would assume, and somebody else would have been the mayor. But CP9 probably would have still went to the island. It's just that, oh wow, now this gets interesting. Okay, because Franky's not as strong as he used to be as a cyborg. He's just a normal human in this context. Tom is still around, but he's like a little older at this point. And then the Straw Hats arrive. Let's see here. The assassination might have still occurred, except instead of us trying to assassinate Iceberg, they might have tried to assassinate Tom, because Tom probably would have still had the blueprints if he was still alive, if he never died, in his possession. So I guess the CP9 would have, like, infiltrated Galileo the same as they normally did, and then they would have tried to assassinate Tom, and then maybe the Straw Hats could have been blamed for that, just like how they were blamed for assassinating Iceberg, or the attempted assassination on Iceberg. And then kind of like the arc sort of goes about the same pace it does in the actual story, with the Straw Hats being on the run, and then eventually, Robin would have still have been kidnapped. The only difference there is if Franky and Robin were kidnapped and they were, like, together, they could speak about, like, Franky could be like, hey, I was on Laughtail. I found it with Roger. And Robin would be like, what? It is like, that would have been different. But overall, I guess the fights would be very different with Franky, like with Fukuro and everything, because of the lack of cyborg attachments and stuff. But that would have been different. And I'm not sure if Franky would have joined the Straw Hats at the end of the arc, but overall, it would have probably followed a very similar structure with the Water 7 and Ennie's lobby arcs. Yeah, with CP9 trying to get their hands on the Pluton blueprints and everything, yeah. I don't know. It's this weird thing where you change one thing in the One Piece story, and it, like I said, creates some kind of butterfly effect for the rest of it. Whatever. I'll leave you guys to think up other possibilities on how that could change the story, but any potential reality where Franky is not a Straw Hat, I don't want to think about, right? Okay. Well, anyway, that's the video, but before I get going, let's have one more installment of Frog Facts before I go. We're still doing Frog Facts when I get back. It's just when I film the videos for when I was on vacation, which will be out tomorrow and then Friday, I didn't do Frog Facts for those, so we'll take a little break from it, but we'll get back eventually. Frog Facts.
Tekking.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about this guy right here. Kind of a unique looking frog, right? It doesn't look like it has a face, or rather it looks like its eyes are like part of its actual torso or something. Very unusual kind of frog here. This is the purple frog, and it is a burrowing frog. So the name implies it's a fossorial animal. Fossorial animals, it is taken Latin for like an animal that digs. So I'm assuming it's the same root word for fossil, like fossorial, fossil, something found underground or something you have to dig for. And these are animals that dig or live underground, like moles, for example, okay? And there's certain frogs that are burrowing frogs that do the same thing, and they spend a lot of their life underground, as is the case with the purple frog, which makes sense given that its face is a little bit misshapen. Not misshapen, it's actually very optimal for digging, because it has like a wedge kind of shaped face, so it can kind of like burrow into the ground easier, and it's like strong upper body, a lot of muscle tissue to like dig into the ground and stuff like that. There's a certain species of burrowing frogs that will surface to eat. They don't spend they spend a lot of time underground, but they do surface to eat and do stuff like that. The burrowing frog pretty much spends most of its life underground and will actually subsist on like termites and stuff. It lives in southern India, and it will really only emerge from underground during the monsoon, during the raining season, for about 2 weeks in order to mate, and then will go back underground. And this is the fascinating thing, because it lives underground for the vast majority of its life, and it's only found found in a particular region of southern India, and it only emerges during this torrential downpour. And by the way, a lot of its body structure is like adapted to the point where it can resist strong winds and strong like squalls and like torrential rains, so it doesn't get knocked down or anything like that. So it's like evolved for that purpose. But because it only shows up during the monsoon, it actually was not discovered as a species until relatively recently. I think within like the last 10-15 years it was discovered, because scientists are not often going around during this middle of the monsoon season. So it just like it hampers, scientists in the field like actually studying animals. So for the most part, it was left completely unknown, because it would only pop out for 2 weeks out of the year when it's raining, and then go back underground and be like, well, nothing happened here, whatever. All right. Well, anyway, that was Frog Facts for the day. Thanks for watching the video, everybody. This will be Tekking, signing out.